Hello, my name is Paula Alonso, and I'm one of the compliance officers from the institutional compliance team, and we have about 37 slides that we'll be covering today. We have four main objectives for our compliance training today: an awareness of our compliance program at UAMS, knowledge of several terms that you see on your screen. We're going to briefly go over those and give you an idea of what each one of those are about, learn how to report a suspected issue at UAMS, and learn where to get additional information that you might need to be compliant. The leaders at UAMS have made a commitment to have a strong compliance program. The names that you see on your screen represent the individuals that lead different areas of this compliance commitment. One of the main responsibilities of the compliance leaders is to educate employees and remind the staff about compliance. Bob Bishop is the Vice Chancellor for Institutional Compliance and the Chief Compliance Officer. UAMS maintains a high standard of legal and ethical behavior. We want to make sure that all employees at UAMS are aware of the standard and are carrying out the standard each day in their role at work. UAMS employees are required to sign and review a Code of Conduct pledge, which I'm sure most of you have done, and this ensures that each employee is aware of the UAMS code, and it's also a way to demonstrate our pledge to corporate compliance. So what does compliance mean for each of us as we're working? It means we're pledging to work with integrity and respect of others, respect diversity, and value teamwork. It means that we're agreeing to follow all federal and state standards with an emphasis on preventing fraud, waste, and abuse, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. And it really means that it's up to each one of us to do what is right all the time as we complete our role at work. And it means we have a responsibility to report any actions thought to be illegal or unethical. So let's talk a little bit more about the Code of Conduct. As mentioned in one of the previous slides, it states that each new employee signs a Code of Conduct. So by completing this training today, you will have signed a Code of Conduct. And it is our affirmation that we are teaching our employees about the high standards that we have here at UAMS, and the following slides as we go through them are what our code actually is made up of. It's part of our code to avoid improper claims, and that's submitting a claim to a healthcare payer that has services that were not provided by or were provided by an unlicensed provider, or maybe a provider that was excluded from being able to bill. It could be for a service that's not medically necessary. Again, any improper claims, false records, it's our code not to have false records be made or to be used, and certainly any conspiracy to defraud, that no employee, agent, or administrator of UAMS would be a part of any conspiracy to defraud. This slide reminds us of healthcare fraud relating to healthcare matters, really meaning that we can't be involved in any type of a scheme or any kind of a healthcare profiting situation where we've received kickbacks or bribes or anything of value that would be used to influence decision making. It's also reminding us about improper referral of patients. Medicare and Medicaid have pretty strict rules. Patients have the right to choose where they go for their health care, and the providers cannot influence those healthcare decisions by offering incentives to refer patients to UAMS or offering the patients any type of bonus or cashback structures to encourage them to come to UAMS. This information is pretty straightforward. It's reminding us that as a UAMS employee, we can have our decisions if we happen to be in a position that is selecting vendors, working with contractors, or any other third parties, that we're not allowed to make deals, accept offers, any kind of gifts, or any favors, travel, or anything that might improperly affect our decision making with that particular vendor or contractor. In wrapping up about the Code of Conduct, one last slide on that. All employees at UAMS are evaluated with their adherence to the code of conduct. The code of conduct is taken very seriously here, and you also have an obligation to report. There are some slides later in the presentation that talk a little bit more about the hotline, but the number is provided here for you, and again, you'll have it at the end. But all of the reporting that's done on the hotline is taken very seriously. It can be anonymous. We consider it a good faith reporting system, and you're not retaliated against. You don't have to be able to prove it. If you believe something is wrong and it's your opinion, or you at least think there might be a problem, we encourage you to report it and give enough information that it can be investigated. Again, at the bottom of the slide in red, as an employee of UAMS, each of us strive to do what is right all the time. And I think when you think of the code of conduct, that's really what the takeaway from that should be. As long as we're striving to do what's right all the time, we most likely won't have any problem meeting the code. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about fraud and what is fraud. It's generally defined as knowingly and willingly executing or attempting to execute a scheme to defraud any healthcare benefit program. We've heard recently about a situation in Little Rock that was an example of fraud, where a Little Rock physicians group employed a massage therapist but billed the work of the massage therapist as a physical therapist. There certainly is a lot of investigation and still some things going on in court about that case, but Medicare is prosecuting the physician that owned the group as being involved in fraud. Another example of fraud would be processing invoices, maybe the payments for vendors for services that maybe were not delivered. We've all heard about bookkeepers or accountants being charged and paying bogus invoices or bills. Any effort that is seen for billing for work that you didn't do, or billing for a different type of work than what you did, or billing for services that someone else did that you're billing under your number, would all be considered fraud. We do not want anyone to be accused or to commit fraud at UAMS. When we think about waste, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's overutilization of services or practices that result in unnecessary costs to the healthcare system. Certainly, if you're clinical and you're ordering tests for patients, it would be ordering unnecessary tests or tests that you didn't need for that particular patient. If we think of it in a non-clinical, it could be something as simple as ordering books that we didn't need, or ordering more supplies, stockpiling supplies that we don't really need. It's anything that's the misuse of our resources. We have limited resources, and we certainly want to use those wisely at UAMS. Abuse kind of dovetails on our fraud and waste, but it includes any action that results in unnecessary costs to the healthcare system, including the Medicare and Medicaid program, improper payment for services, payment for services that fail to meet the professionally recognized standards of care, or services that are medically unnecessary. Let's think for a few seconds about what compliance might mean to each one of us. If you're an administrator or manager or an employee who's involved in any of the hospitals or clinical activity around documentation, coding, billing, or competitive practice, you must know the applicable laws and regulations and must adhere to all of them. Improper billing practices, overcoding, undercoding are some of the largest compliance issues that we read about, where the most people have gotten in trouble. If you're a billing provider, you must know the billing regulations and adhere to those. And it would seem as though that you wouldn't need to say this, but I need to remind you, you must never bill for a service that you did not personally perform. You must always document thoroughly and carefully select your diagnosis codes and billing codes, procedures that you provided the work, not the work of others. Always seek assistance if you're unclear. It's so much easier to answer the billing questions and assist with the documentation on the front end than it is to try to correct billing after the claims have already left UAMS. This slide contains some examples of illegal or unethical actions. Would hope that none of these things would ever happen at UAMS, but just want to run through these and remind you that these are actions that would not be acceptable. Billing a patient for a medical treatment or service that was not provided, an attending physician billing for a service that a resident performed without the appropriate teaching documentation, inappropriately changing or destroying a medical research or financial record, Altering it to get a desired outcome would be wrong. Stealing money or items that don't belong to you. This could include office supplies from here at UAMS. Someone working in the billing office changing a code on a claim in order to get that claim paid. Getting paid for hours not worked. Asking for or getting anything of value from a vendor in return for influencing a decision to buy that vendor's product. Again, hopefully none of those things would ever happen at UAMS, but those are examples of behaviors that would be unacceptable. This slide has some terms that I want to be sure that everyone's familiar with. We hear the term CMS, which is simply the initials for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. This is the agency that's responsible for administering the Medicare and the Medicaid program. The OIG, we hope to not have to interact with too much, but that's the Office of Inspector General, and it is a division of the federal government created to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse. We deal with occasionally the Medicare OIG that does audits, and then we have the Medicaid OIG office, and we have an OIG office here in Arkansas, a Medicaid office. We had DOJ, we hear the Department of Justice, and this is the government department that can help enforce and prosecute healthcare issues. We do ask that if you or anyone in your department receive communications from any of those above offices that you notify the compliance office immediately. We handle most of the outside audits from these organizations and do like to be aware that we've got correspondence coming in. So again, please, if you receive correspondence from any of those, please forward it on to our office. The next few slides we're going to go through fairly quickly talk about the False Claims Act, and that's really the enforcement tool if you have committed fraud, waste, or abuse. So we talk quite a bit about the False Claims Act, or the FCA as you may see it written sometimes, because it is the powerful tool for enforcing these laws. Annually, $5 billion of federal and state dollars are spent on Medicare and Medicaid. You know, it's important to the government and really should be to us as taxpayers that the money's used wisely. And when the government feels that a person or organization has deliberately received a benefit that they weren't entitled to, they consider it fraud, and they can use the FCA or the False Claims Act to prosecute that person or organization. Let's look at the definition of the False Claims Act. If you go down to 1 on the slide, having actual knowledge that the information is false, acting in deliberate ignorance as to the truth or the falsity of the information. You know, we've all heard the term ignorance is bliss. Well, in this situation, it's not, because you are held responsible for what you should know. Number 3 is acting in reckless disregard of the truth or falsity of the information. The government does not have to prove a specific intent to defraud in order to establish a false claim. So you are held responsible for what you do know as well as what you should know about your book of business. So it's important that we do stay informed on the rules and the regulations, and that we not disregard any of those in order not to commit a false claim. So let's talk for a second about, well, what happens if we do break the law? A violation of the False Claims Act can result in significant civil penalties, and as you can see on the slide, $5,500 to $11,000 per claim, and damages up to 3 times the amount of the overpayment based on the false claim. Also, the government can decide to prosecute the person criminally, which could result in jail sentences for those involved in the fraud. So certainly something that we want to avoid happening. The most common problem areas for false claims dovetails a little bit on what we were talking about earlier as examples of non-compliance, but making a direct or indirect false statement to support a claim, that would be billing for a service maybe not committed, making a secret plan or agreement between 2 or more people to perform an unlawful act which results in payment for a false or fraudulent claim, when a person in position of trust takes money or property belonging to a company for their own use. We've all heard the term embezzlement, or maybe even, read about someone involved in something like that. Causing a reverse false claim where we owe money but we fail to give the money back would also be considered a false claim. We have to worry about our credit balance reports, making sure that we're getting money repaid to the government that needs to be. So we talk a little bit about how can I comply with the false claims, be sure that I'm never involved in something like that. If you're on the clinical side, always document what's complete, accurate, be sure it's legible if you're still handwriting. And the one in red is probably the most important thing. If we're doing what's right all the time, we're not ever going to be involved in anything that's wrong. Never stretch the truth in order to make a service, procedure, or admission covered by insurance. Avoid documenting services so that the services are not billed. Ensure again that all of our handwritten documentation is legible and sent to the Health Information Management Department. And if you notice any inaccuracies or problems in our charge systems or documentation, notify your supervisor or the compliance office immediately. Let's talk a little bit about whistleblower protections under the False Claims Act. We do hope that if you notice something at UMS that you believe is unethical or is not right, that you would report it to your supervisor and go through the channels that we have here on campus. We would hope that you would call the compliance office, and we have a program that would help to work to correct any of those things that we do in fact find out that are not right. But there are protections under the False Claims Act. An individual can be called a relator and may bring a false claim suit on behalf of the government. The False Claims Act provides protection for those who make good faith reports of false claims activity. This is supported by Arkansas state law, and it's also supported by UAMS policy. We do have a reporting policy that can be found in our admin guide that supports folks who do make claims. And we do have the policy that prohibits retaliation or unfair discharge for those making those reports. I do want to make you aware of a policy we have in our administrative guide. It's policy 4.4.09, and it's an ethical conduct/gift policy. The policy outlines legal and ethical guidelines regarding accepting gifts, and it does talk about ethical behavior. Some of the ethical behavior that you see on your screen we've talked about before. We take action to disclose fraud and abuse and corruption to appropriate authorities. We put an honest effort in the performance of our duties. We conserve our UAMS property. So those are some of our ethical statements. The policy also states that UAMS employees may not solicit or accept a gift in the following situations, and it lists some of those. That we're not taking gifts from vendors or from patients. We'll talk a little bit more about the gifts on the next slide. A few more points about the gift policy. UAMS employees may not solicit or accept a gift from a healthcare industry vendors, anyone doing business with UAMS or seeking to do business, or given to you, a gift that might be given to you because of your position at UAMS. And also the line in red on your slide, meals for UAMS employees from vendors offered with a marketing or educational program are not allowed. This is probably one of the reasons that we get the most calls on the gift policy, is asking about meals, asking if it's okay to accept a dinner from a vendor that you've been doing business with, and the answer is always no on those. It does create probably the most confusion. We have vendors that come on campus and want to do educational programs about their product, and they offer to bring lunch or provide lunch, and the answer on those are always no. There are a few exceptions to the UAMS definition of a gift, and you can see a couple of those. A one-time token appreciation from a patient, as long as the value is less than $25. Rewards and prizes that are in contests that we might have that are open to everyone. Or a commercial discount. We get some discounts from some of our local vendors as part of being a UAMS employee or a government employee, and certainly those types of things are okay. If you're uncertain, you can always contact the compliance office and ask if that situation is okay or not okay. And then there's some gift policy frequently asked questions, and we've listed the website there that you could go and see if maybe the question you have is on the website. Another term we want to be sure that you're aware of is the anti-kickback statutes. There are laws that prohibit an intentional offer, payment, solicitation, or receipt of anything of value in return for the referral of a Medicare or Medicaid patient. That's prohibited by law and also by UAMS policy. An example of that might be if we agreed to waive a patient's copay in order to get their business, or we let it be known that we were going to waive copays to other physicians if they referred their patients here. That would be a violation of that. It can be applied in several different situations, to rent on buildings, to lots of different things. But anything that you're putting out there as an intentional offer to lure Medicare or Medicaid government paying patients to your facility would be considered a kickback situation, and that certainly is not something that we want to participate in. Another term to be sure that y'all are aware of, EMTALA, Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, and it is also known as an anti-dumping law. It occurs mainly with emergency services that are open to the public, prohibits hospitals who participate in the Medicare from delaying care, refusing treatment, or transferring patients to another hospital if they are not able to pay for services. Certainly our emergency departments are very aware of this and are very careful not to violate that act.
Hello, this is Philip Principe, Director of the Export Control and Conflict of Interest Offices. The Conflict of Interest Office helps to identify and manage potential conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is an outside interest that affects or could affect the performance of an employee's UAMS duties. We identify potential conflicts of interest through an electronic disclosure system. Employees must complete their COI form within the first 2 weeks of employment and annually thereafter. Employees must also update the forms within 30 days of acquiring a new outside interest. The Conflict of Interest Office is here to help and answer any questions you might have. Please visit our website at coi.uams.edu for more information. Hello, my name is Phil Principe, Director of Export Controls. I just want to talk briefly about export control laws and how they apply here at UAMS. Export control laws are federal laws and regulations that prohibit the unlicensed export of certain control technologies to foreign persons for reasons including national security and trade protection. Exports are defined very broadly. They include oral and written disclosures, transfers of information, or any actual shipment outside the U.S. of technology, software, code, or equipment. It also applies to disclosure of this information to foreign persons within the United States. That's called a deemed export. Any method of disclosure may apply, and examples of control technologies include certain chemical agents, imaging systems, composite materials, and certain pathogens. These laws do apply broadly throughout the U.S. economy and not just in the healthcare field. There are a variety of situations where export control regulations may apply here at UAMS. These include hosting foreign visitors, traveling on UAMS business outside the United States, shipment of items from the UAMS to locations outside the United States, international collaborations, and foreign national participation in research activities here at UAMS. Fortunately, the vast majority of what we do at UAMS does fall under one of the other exclusions to the export control licensing requirements. If you are involved in any of these matters listed above, please be sure and contact my office at 686-6168 if you have any questions. Thanks.
One other term I want to mention is an advanced beneficiary notice. This is a term that we a lot of times refer to it as an ABN that is a requirement by the Medicare program. It is a risk area for healthcare facilities. Medicare puts a fair amount of significance in this particular process, so I want to make it aware to all billing providers or the healthcare part of our organization. The requirements were put in place by the federal government to create a more informed beneficiary. So it's this particular process occurs when a physician or a healthcare worker orders a service that Medicare does not consider covered. Medicare has certain diagnosis and frequency of tests that they're willing to cover as part of the Medicare program, and when something is ordered outside of what Medicare covers. Medicare expects the provider of that service to explain that to the patient and let them know of their potential financial liability. Again, it's called an ABN form. We do have software within our Epic, our electronic medical record system, that helps the provider. When a test is ordered, it lets them know that that test is not going to be covered for that patient. And then there's a form that's required that we get the patient's signature and inform them that they're not covered. If you're working in the healthcare area, be aware of the ABN form and know that it is a requirement. It's considered part of a good compliance program to have a good ABN program. And if you have questions, you can certainly ask on the units that you work and certainly call the compliance office.
This is Derry Scalzo, Research Compliance Officer at UAMS. As you all probably know, we do have quite a bit of research that goes on at UAMS. Our demonstrated commitment to research compliance supports the institution's ability to attract research support from both industry sponsors and granting agencies, as well as helps minimize the inherent risks associated with conducting research. In the Office of Research Compliance, we help promote the responsible conduct of research and the protection of both our human and animal research subjects' safety, rights, and welfare. In the Office of Research Compliance, we develop and present educational programs about research requirements and best practices. We can tailor those education programs to the needs of your study team. We also review and provide feedback regarding current research activities. This includes both random and for-cause reviews. We respond to research compliance-related inquiries and concerns from investigators, from research staff, from the IRB, the IACUC, or UAMS administration. If you have any questions or concerns about research, please feel free to contact me, Derry Scalzo, at 686-8062 or via the email address on your screen. Thank you.
As we're starting to wrap up, I just want to mention this to billing providers. If you're a billing provider and need more information or would like more information about CPT coding, proper teaching notes, scribing policies, or other specific billing topics, we've given you some numbers there. Anyone in the compliance office here at UAMS, or if you're practicing over at Children's, you can contact Allison Steinby. Her number is on the screen. We're available to come and talk at any of your staff meetings about billing topics. We do have some mini PowerPoints that have been developed on billing topics, critical care billing, evaluation and management code selection, scribing, documenting proper teaching notes, and we are available to help you with any of your billing process. Again, it's better for us to get the billing processes correct on the front end than to have to do billing corrections on the back end, and we are available for training.
Hi, this is Sharnice Moore, Research Billing Compliance Manager at UAMS. Research billing can be complex. In order to ensure that UAMS bills appropriately for participants in research studies, a PowerPoint training has been developed specifically for research billing. This training is required annually for principal investigators and research study coordinators. The link for that training is provided on this slide. If you are a billing provider and would like more information about research billing, please feel free to contact me at 603-1002.
So to wrap up a little bit, we've learned of many situations that can or could cause unethical or uncompliant behavior. How do I report something I suspect is not right? There's several ways to report a perceived compliance problem. I've given you some of those at the bottom of the screen. Discuss the problem with your manager, another manager, or an administrator. Contact any one of the institutional compliance officers, and I've given you a couple of phone numbers there. And we do have a hotline. The number is an 888 number. You can remain completely anonymous. You can give as much information as you want. We ask, if you do use the hotline, that you give us enough information that we're able to be successful in our investigation. Again, that hotline number is there. It's available 24/7, and we encourage you, if you do want to report something and you are uncomfortable going through your manager or calling the compliance officers, that you use the hotline so it can be investigated. This slide just has some more informational references for you where the Code of Conduct is, CMS's website, Arkansas Medicare, our HIPAA policies, our institutional compliance policies. Just a reminder of where some of those references might be located. I want to thank you for your time today in completing this training, and again, welcome to UAMS. A reminder that by completing this training, you are attesting that you have been instructed on and received information regarding the UAMS Code of Conduct. As a reference, you see the statement there. I understand that I'm responsible for knowing, understanding, and following it, and if I don't understand something or I have questions, I will ask the appropriate person for the answer. Again, welcome to UAMS. Thank you for taking the training. If you have any questions, we've given you numbers to contact.